fact, Gaddafi have used those sentiments a great deal. I mean, he's always concerned about, foreign invaders coming to get you and so on and so forth. You need to defend yourself. And the Libyan people can definitely rally to that. So we definitely need to be concise on the resolutions and the approach and communicating with the Libyan people as what the objective is. And if the objective, like I said, is to free or assist the Libyan people in their freedom, I think that may be a good approach to topple him, I guess.
Jay Stout in Los Angeles, let me come back to you to expand on what we were speaking with Wahid about there, because we're discussing there really essentially what is the best option for the Libyan people right now. I want your military mind on this. In the current status, in this current situation, does a no-fly zone look like the best option at the moment, the only option at the moment, or do you think there are other avenues to go down?
Well, I will agree with the other gentleman. To establish a no-fly zone, you do have to take out those air defenses, and that's a violent act. That's a very aggressive act, and it leaves Libya naked to air aggression. Now, that being the case, it may be that a no-fly zone, as seemingly innocuous as it is kind of like using a hammer when a surgeon's knife might be a little bit better option. I think that's why world leaders are hesitant to commit wholly to the idea of a no-fly zone.
What would the surgeon's knife be in this case then?
Ideally, it would be diplomacy, I think, but establishing the no-fly zone certainly is not going to stop the killing. You can kill your people with means other than air power, and I think that's taken place and would continue regardless of whether or not a no-fly zone is in place.
Very diplomatically handled there, Lieutenant Colonel. Let me go over to Khawa Qureshi in London for a legal mind. But again, I want your opinion here. We got the opinion there of Jay Stout in Los Angeles, and you, Mr. Qureshi, have given us the history of Security Council resolutions and how they work and how they may not work. Your actual opinion on this, if we were to go to a resolution on no-fly zone, is it the best option at the moment?
First point is, given the history of Iraq, and let's not forget there are parallels that we can learn from and lessons that we need to learn from so that we don't make the same mistakes in terms of intervention. There was considerable opposition to the no-fly zones in northern and southern Iraq from Russia and China. It's highly likely that similar opposition would be voiced if no-fly zones were sought to be imposed through the Security Council resolution invoking Article 42, namely military measures. So it seems unlikely that the Security Council would authorize such use of force, which leaves it to states of their own volition to use force. The logistical difficulties of establishing, patrolling Libyan skies, as vast as they are, having access to airstrips the UK has in Cyprus at Akrotiri, the US is positioning its aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, that might enable the aircraft to patrol the skies. But fundamentally, the questions are, what will this achieve? Will it be counterproductive? Are there other ways of going about this? And we can see that the killing is taking place. Artillery bombardment is being used. You have ground troops who are carrying out offensives, however weak and enfeebled they may be. And there's the potential to use helicopters and evade detection on radar, carry out missions, and thus render the no-fly zone impotent. And the last thing that the international community wants to do is to impose a requirement that may have questionable legality and see it being violated. The situation in Iraq was very different. In Iraq, what the international community was seeking to do was to ensure that an already enfeebled, weakened military capability on the part of the Iraqis after the first Gulf War wasn't used to carry out atrocities against the Kurds in the north and the Shias in the south in a fairly effective manner.
Wahid Burshan, over there at the border, Tunisian-Libyan border, let's actually move past the idea of a no-fly zone, because we don't know if it's going to actually come into place or not, and whether it will be done by a UN Security Council or not. My question to you is whether you think that talk of no-fly zones and sanctions and all these things are actually just stepping stones on the way to something much bigger, that perhaps the international community is looking at Muammar Gaddafi and the regime right now and saying, you know, there's probably only one option to get rid of him.
Well, I think we need to be very, very careful of that. I mean, you mentioned earlier, it is about the Libyan people. The Libyan people have already decided to look beyond this gentleman, and they are looking for the future. They want to develop a modern society, a modern country, and I think they are looking for the day where they hopefully can do this as seamlessly as possible, or as easy as possible. I'm not sure that's available to them right at this point. So looking from that perspective, I think if they and they feel that they're capable of doing so, what you need to look for is ways to assist them and empower them, give them the confidence. I don't know, I'm not a military man, but maybe give them some intelligence and you know, to be careful of certain situations and so on and so forth. That kind of I don't know if you could call it a positive support, if you will. I think that probably be much more conducive to them. I look forward to developing some leadership, some structure, and some of the freed cities, where they will be able to develop certain leadership, where the rest of the international community will be able to communicate with them and assist them, and to help them. And I understand the issue. The international community want to help the Libyan people, but it's very, very difficult when, just like you said earlier, it's cities, you know, all over the place, and it's very, very difficult to assist. But we need to kind of think out of the box. We need to think what's best for the Libyan people. I hope the international community, and I think this is the biggest fear, the Arab countries, they all have tasted what the international community have done to them in terms of Iraq and so on. And they are a little bit skeptic as, okay, it could be a good cause at the beginning, but it ends up to something totally different. It warped itself to you know, scenarios that at this point we don't see. And that's the biggest fear. If we can develop a strategy and develop and communicate it clearly to the people and focus on assisting them, I think it would, the people are willing and capable of handling Gaddafi's issue on their own.
Okay, final quick thought, because we are running out of time, but I just want to raise one more issue. It was an isolated incident, but perhaps an indication of the unpredictability we're dealing with as well. Go back to 21st February, 2 Libyan jets landed in Malta, completely unexpectedly. On board, 2 senior pilots who said they'd been ordered to fire on protesters in Benghazi. They said they simply couldn't do it. They defied the orders, they flew to Malta, they were seeking political asylum instead. Jay Stout in Los Angeles, final word with you. That just shows that we are dealing with something very unpredictable here, not just Gaddafi, but whether his Air Force wants to actually follow him or not. It goes back to the central point, can this idea be effective?